ও সর্বাণী, তুমি তোমার ভিডিওটাও অফ করে দাও।
হুম।
ইট ইজ লাইভ।
নমস্কার, শুভ সন্ধ্যা। আজ আমরা এখানে রথযাত্রা উদযাপন করার জন্য জড়ো হয়েছি। করোনা ভাইরাস হয়তো আমাদের এখনো গৃহবন্দী রেখেছে, তবে আমরা আমাদের ট্র্যাডিশন আর হেরিটেজ থেকে খুব একটা দূরে সরে যাইনি। তাই আজ এই ভার্চুয়াল প্ল্যাটফর্মে আমরা আমাদের রথযাত্রা উদযাপন করব। Today, we are commemorating a legendary festival of Sanatan Dharma named Ratha Yatra. This festival not only has its religious and spiritual significance, but also has a deep social connect. Millions of people gather at holy Puri Dham to pull the Ratha of Lord Jagannath every year. The word Jagannath is made up of two words, Jaga, which means universe, and Natha means Lord, that is Lord of the universe. There are many stories about Jagannath Temple of Puri, and I'm sure our next speaker will go over some of them or will give us insightful thoughts about Ratha Yatra. So, our next speaker, our next distinguished speaker's name is Mr. Bob Evans. He has deep interest and knowledge on Hinduism, Hindu scripture, and Sanatan Dharma. I'll invite Bob to speak few words on this auspicious event. Mr. Bob, it's on to you.
Jai Jagannath, namaskar. I've been asked to say a few words about Rath Yatra, and normally that should be an easy thing to do. There's been a lot of research done by Ordia done by Bengali scholars, done by Western scholars, and particularly by German scholars on Jagannath, the rituals of the Puri temple and whatnot. And all this material is in the University of Chicago library. But unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 epidemic, the library is shut down and I couldn't get access to that material. So the few things I'm going to say today are based on materials I've had at home and my own personal experiences. And so I'll share things from that perspective. So I hope that you all do not have high expectations. I'd like to start with just sharing my own personal experience of Ratha Yatra. My first contact with Ratha Yatra was not in India. It was in the Loop in Chicago in 1974. I'd happened to be in the Loop, and the Hare Krishna people were celebrating Ratha Yatra, and I saw Jagannath go down State Street. This piqued my interest, and in 1975, I went back to see the whole festival conducted by them. There were two routes, went north on State Street, turned west on Randolph, circled around behind City Hall, and parked the routes close to the Picasso sculpture in downtown Chicago. Then, in 1978, I was in Kolkata at that time, and I went to the Rath conducted by my Guru Dev, Prabhupada Prankishore Goswami, at the Sri Gauranga Mandir in Laketown. Then again in 83, I attended the same Rath Yatra at the same place. 1985, I went to Puri, and I was there a month before Rath Yatra started and could see the construction of the Raths taking place. Then about 25 years went by and I had a little contact with Rath Yatra. And finally in 2010, I started attending the Rath Yatra conducted by the Sri Jagannath Society of Greater Chicago, which at that time was located in the Bharat Ashram. Many of you may remember that. And so I've been going to the Rath Yatra since then as often as I could. So that's been my general contact with Rath Yatra. So what is Rath Yatra? What's a general definition of Rath Yatra? Basically, it's a festival, an utsav, which is held in the rainy season on the second day of the bright lunar fortnight of Ashar, which was June 23rd this year, in which an image is brought out of a temple, put on some sort of vehicle with wheels, and taken through the local neighborhood. And this is how most people experience it. It's a time of a lot of fun and excitement, and people enjoy it. And to enjoy it at that level, you don't need to know much more than that. So I've just been told by Shika I need to look up. So that's a general definition. In Eastern India and throughout the world where Eastern Indian culture has spread, the Rath Yatra is basically modeled on the festival that takes place in Jagannath Puri, the Jagannath temple in Puri. And it certainly is more complex than what it takes place at local regional temples, neighborhood temples, where most of us encounter Rath Yatra. Puri is known as Purushottama Kshetra. It's one of the four holy dhams in India. Badri is the Thakur of that dham is Narayan. Rameshwar, the Thakur of that dham is Shiva. Dwarka, the Thakur of that dham is Krishna. So who is the Thakur of the fourth dham, Puri? Purushottam. So Purushottam really means the highest Lord, and it's meant to be a form of God, a form of divinity, which is all encapsulating. All the different forms of Thakur are contained within Purushottam. And For this is one reason that many devotees, when they've gone to have darshan of Jagannath, have seen different Thakurs in Jagannath. Some have seen Buddhadev, some have seen Ganesh, some have claimed that Jagannath is a Tirthankar in the Jain faith. Some have seen him as Shiva, as a tribal deity. So Purushottam is a concept of God that encompasses all these. And following the teachings of Mahaprabhu, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, most Bengalis, I believe, would say that Jagannath is Sri Krishna Thakur.
Push back.
Before going into the rationale, before going into Ratha Yatra as celebrated Purti, and we'll touch over some of the main features of that, we should take a minute to look at the rationale or the reasons for why an image is brought outside of a temple and paraded through the neighborhoods and streets that the temple is located. So why does that happen? So in Puri and in many of the ancient large temples in India, both north and south, temples which at some point had royal patronage and therefore are very grand and elaborate, Thakur there is considered the king of kings and lord of lords. This expression comes from Handel, and I'm sure Handel would not like that I'm using it in this context, but Thakur is king of kings and lord of lords. So as such, Thakur receives royal treatment in all of his services, all of his ritual activities, how he's bathed, how he's fed, entertainment. All this is patterned on how kings were treated in ancient times in India. Clearly, in these places, the Aishwarya Bhav is the dominant feeling behind the art and the rituals and the utshavs, the glory and power of God as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So in the old days, it was extremely common for the king to go out and travel through his kingdom. This tour into the kingdom would accomplish a couple of things. It would allow the king to see his kingdom, find out what's going on. It would allow the subjects who live in the kingdom that may not have the ability to go into the court to have contact with the king, express themselves, see the king. And so it certainly would help to cement the relationship between the governed and governor. And this would bring the king and the subjects closer together. It also enabled the king to receive tributes and gifts and whatnot. It enabled him to find out exactly what's going on in his kingdom. Finally, it was an enjoyable activity for the king to get out and go through his kingdom. Now, as we all know, during this time of COVID-19 seclusion, it's very enjoyable to get out of the house, move through the neighborhood. Gets a little close and claustrophobic to be inside. And sometimes I think Thakur may feel the same way. So I think that the reason Thakur is taken out of the temple is basically based on that. There are other explanations, but I think that this is the simplest and probably the most appropriate. Now, Thakur going on a ride outside of his temple is not something that only happens at the Jagannath temple. In fact, it happens all over India in temples north and south that are, like I said, large ancient temples. Like if we look at our situation here in Chicago, even the temple, the Thakurs at the Balaji temple in Aurora are sometimes brought out in a procession and taken out around the temple. Sometimes the Thakurs are brought out and they go on a nice boat ride in the lake at the temple. So it's a very common part of ritual worship of Thakur, for Thakur to be brought out outside the temple. But in Puri, there's a very fundamental difference between what goes on at Puri and what goes on at other temples in India. Now, the difference is this. For the ancient Vaishnava or even Shaivite temples that are founded on strict patterns of worship called agamas, there is a distinction between the type of images in the temple. These temples will have what's called a mula vigraha, which is the main image. These are usually large and made of stone, may weigh several tons. Then surrounding that vigraha, there will be many smaller vigrahas, usually made of metal, that are collectively called utshav vigrahas. So what do these do? These different forms of Thakur stand in for the main image in the temple for other types of ceremonies, like for bathing ceremonies, for feeding ceremonies. If somebody wants to sponsor a special event because of something good happening to their family, the Thakur will stand in for the main Thakur of the temple. So in these ancient temples in South India, it's the Utshav Vigrahas that are brought outside the temple and go on a rath or on a travel through the local neighborhood. The main Thakur of the temple never comes out. In Puri, it's very, very unique that it's not a stand-in Thakur that comes out for the Ratha Yatra. It is the main Thakur of the temple that comes out and goes on the Ratha Yatra. So if we look at Puri in the context of what goes on at these other ancient temples in India, the fact that the Mula Vigraha, the main image of the temple, is the one that comes out and goes on a procession through the area is like very, very unique. And it's unique practice to Puri. So the Thakurs that are brought out of the Puri temple at Ratha Yatra, there are 4 of them. Jagannath, Subhadra, Jagannath's sister, Krishna's sister, Baladev or Balaram, and Sudarshan Thakur. Sudarshan Thakur is often overlooked, I would say, in thinking about this. He is represented as kind of a pillar or post with a chakra on it, but he is one of the 4 Thakurs that receive the main worship at the Puri temple. So all these Thakurs are all made of neem wood. They're made of wood, and they're plastered over with natural plant substances and paints to give the distinctive iconographic features that we know for Jagannath. And these Thakurs not only are made of wood and natural plant fibers, but they're very massive. It takes many priests to move the image outside to put on the Ratha Yatra. So this is not something that is easily done and done by only a couple of people. It takes a large team of people working to get the Thakur out and onto the Rath. So wood, neem wood, as we know from practices in Eastern India, is a common substance that images are made out of. You will see many places Gaur Nitai images in temples are made of neem wood. Some Radha Krishna images are made of neem wood. And for the Shastras that tell what things are appropriate to make vigrahas out of, wood is given as one of the substances. In fact, I've read in a couple places that some of the ancient temples in South India originally had wood images in them, but through time, the images were replaced by kings with stone and metallic images. And the reasons for that, if you think about it, are very practical because, as you know, so many of our ritual activities in forms of pujo, things we offer to Thakur, are wet. And so wood eventually begins to decay and fall apart. And so this happens for the Jagannath images in Puri, which are made of neem wood, as I said. They eventually the wood that they're made of begins to deteriorate over time, and the Thakurs must be replaced, and they're replaced in cycles of 8, 12, or 19 years. And the ceremony is called Nava Kalevara, or new body ceremony. And I think what drives which cycle they're replaced on is how the wood is holding up. So right now, the Thakurs at Puri that are being worshipped, the subject of Ratha Yatra in 2020, they were replaced last in 2015. So many months before the Ratha Yatra starts in Puri, the 3 Raths are constructed outside the temple. And each year, they're constructed from new wood, and they're constructed anew with new parts. So there's nothing reused year to year. Based on my experience of being down there at the time they were being built, these Raths are massive. They're very large. And I think, one reason maybe they're remade each year, because you think of what the parking fees would be to park such a large Rath each year, it'd be immense. But the wood that goes into the Rath is used in the temple kitchens to prepare prasad, so none of it's wasted. So the Rath, actually, the chariot festival begins before the Thakurs are taken out of the temple. It's part of a number of rituals that take place there. It actually starts with a festival called Snan Jatra, which happens on the full moon day in the month of Jyeshta, which this year was June 5th. So during this time, Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev, and Sudarshan are moved from the main altar they are in the temple and put on a special Snan Bedi, where they are bathed. And during this time, they're bathed with wood being poured directly on them, and with water being poured directly on them. And so much water is poured on them that the paint features, the plant substances that coat them are all washed off. And so they're basically lose their distinctive features that we see. After they're washed, after they've had their snan, they're moved to another location in the temple for the next 13 days of the dark lunar fortnight. They are considered to be ill on Ashara and ill with a cold and not available for darshan by the general public. So they are out of view for this period of time. Also during this time, the Adivashi people who have a special rite in the Jagannath temple will recoat and repaint the images and put the designs on them that we all know about. And on the new moon day, Thakur's eyes, painting of Thakur's eyes are done, and it's a festival called Netrochab. And the Thakurs are considered then fully recovered. On the next day after that, which is the first day of the bright lunar fortnight, the Gundicha temple is cleaned. Now, the Gundicha is a temporary temple, a temporary temple that's about a little over a mile north of the Jagannath temple. It's not used much through the year. It's considered to be Jagannath's vacation house, you could say. And there are other explanations for it as well. So that temple is cleaned and made ready for the arrival of Jagannath. On the second day of the bright lunar fortnight is when the Rath actually starts. So the Thakurs are brought out of the temple and placed on the 3 rots that are created for them, and the journey begins. Due to their size, the Thakurs are brought out in a series of motions, lifting, heaving them up and putting them down gently on a number of very, very large pillows filled with cotton. And so this sort of motion of Thakur being lifted up and set down by a large number of people gives Thakur kind of a very royal motion, royal gait in the way that he's moved along. And this part of the ceremony is called Pahandi. Before Jagannath is put on his particular cart, the king of Puri will personally go and sweep the area with a broom. The first Thakur that's brought out is Sudarshana, who's put on Subhadra's chariot, Rath. Then Jagannath, Balaram, and Subhadra are brought out and put on their respective Raths. Once they're comfortably seated and securely seated on their Raths, then they are pulled by thousands and thousands of devotees to the Gundicha temple. And the road that goes from the Jagannath temple to the Gundicha is like just barely over a mile. They stay at the Gundicha temple for 9 days. And on the 10th day of the bright lunar fortnight, Thakur makes the second Rath, which is a travel from the Gundicha back to the main temple. And this is called the Bahuda Jatra. So actually a fully enacted Rath Jatra has a coming and going part to it. Most people, when they go to Puri, are going for the first part, where he goes from the temple to the Gundicha temple. Now, the interesting thing is that when the Thakurs are outside the temple, all of the strict caste-based rules determining access to Thakur, entrance to the temple, etc., are totally relaxed. When I first went to Puri with Shika, we signed the pilgrimage book of a Panda that served Shika's brother-in-law's family. His name was Shurjaldas Roy Panda. So he gave Shika guidance, showed her the temple, and brought us prasad. But he couldn't take me inside because I'm obviously not Indian. And he said something to me that stuck with me. He said, "Baba, due to the long practices of the temple, I know how you feel, but I can't take you into the temple. But if you come down during the time of Rath Jatra, I can actually take you up and you can touch the image of Jagannath." Now, I never was down there at that time, but to me it made an impression that all of these strict rules are relaxed during that time. Everyone, when Thakur comes out of the temple, can have darshan. They can have access to Thakur, and the only limitations are just the limitations that come from being in a large crowd. When you're packed in, you don't always have freedom of movement. It's not easy to move around, but if you can get close to Thakur, then you can have that close kind of contact. So this sort of flipping of the ritual, the strictness of the temple is a pretty common feature of a lot of festivals throughout the world, where things are turned topsy-turvy for a particular time. But there's a nice story that illustrates this, which I'll tell you now. This is illustrated by actually something that happens on the return journey of Jagannath. On the way back from the Gundicha to the temple, the Rath stops at the samadhi and home of Jagannath's Muslim devotee. This devotee was named Salabeg. Salabeg has a sort of history and relationship that's very much similar if you know the story of Haridas Thakur in the Bengal Vaishnava tradition. Salabeg has a similar type situation. Salabeg was the son of a widowed Brahmin woman and a Muslim father. When Salabeg was born, he followed his father's faith and his father's occupation. His father was in the military, went around conquering, doing things like that. During a terrible battle once, his father was killed, and Salabeg was wounded to the point where he was going to die. His mother went and prayed to Jagannath that Jagannath would spare her son, and Salabeg recovered. But Salabeg, when he found out from his mother that he had been saved by the intervention of Jagannath, had a complete turn of heart. Salabeg became a bhakto of Jagannath, but he had a problem in that because he was a Muslim, he could not go in to have darshan of his Lord, despite the fact that he had this deep faith. So Salabeg built a home on the path of the Ratha Yatra so that every year when Thakur came out of the temple, he could have darshan of his Lord from his home. And Salabeg began to compose a large number of devotional songs in Oriya, which to this day are sung in the Jagannath Temple in Puri. These beautiful songs were written by Jagannath's Muslim devotee. So the story goes that because of his change of heart, Salabeg began to go to other places in India. He went to Vrindavan. Back in those days, I'm talking about the 17th century, really before the British consolidated their power in India. It was difficult to move around, to travel any great distance at that time. So Salabeg was in Vrindavan, and he wanted to get back for his annual darshan of Jagannath. He came out of the temple. But due to travel problems and travel logistics, he realized that he was going to be about a week late to get back. And that made him very, very sad because this was his one time during the year. He would see his Lord, and he wasn't going to get back, despite his best efforts. So the Ratha Yatra started up. Jagannath went out from his temple, went to Gunicha, and on the way back, the Rath stopped at Salabeg's house. Nothing could make it move. All the people pulling on it couldn't make it budge. The king brought in elephants, tied elephants to move the Rath. It wouldn't move. So the king had to arrange to have all the rituals done for Jagannath while he was on the Rath because nothing moved. Finally, Salabeg got back and he had his darshan of Jagannath, who had stopped in front of his house. And after he had had that darshan, the cart began to move again. So Thakur stopped at Salabeg's house and waited for him to come back to have his darshan. So Purushottam, Kshetra and Puri, Ratha Yatra have been an important part of Bengali religious life. Been an important part of Bengali religious life for a long time. Maybe as much as 1,000 years back, if we care to speculate. And why do I say that? So, Raghunandan Bhattacharya was a contemporary of Mahaprabhu living in 15th century Navadvip. Raghunandan was not a Vaishnava. He was not a tantric. He was a very strict Brahmin, intellectual. And he put his great talent into clarifying and writing about how ritual should be done from a strict Brahmin perspective, from a strict orthopractic perspective. He wrote 28 different treatises talking about different aspects. He wrote one on Durga Puja. In fact, sort of the structure of the Durga Puja as it's properly celebrated today were codified and created by him a long time ago. Of his 28 treatises, he devoted one entire treatise to Purushottam Kshetra and Ratha Yatra. So obviously it was something important to him. And if you stop and think that he probably was not writing about anything new, but was writing about long established practices, we can say that maybe this had been going on hundreds of years before he wrote about it, maybe as much as 500 years. So it's possible that involvement by Bengalis in the religious life of Ratha Yatra goes back that far. There are a couple of other considerations. When Mahaprabhu became a sannyasi, he went to Puri and spent most of his time as a sannyasi in Puri. And the reason for that was that Mahaprabhu's brother had also become a sannyasi. Mahaprabhu was the only son of Shochima's mother, who was a widow at that time. So he went to live in Puri so that Shochima could find out from the pilgrims that would go every year to Puri how he was doing and receive news about him. And if you read the Vaishnava literature, there's a lot of talk about Puri and Ratha Yatra in it. Another consideration is that the Jagannath temple is an important part of Tantra, a very important part of worship of Shakti, because within the Jagannath temple complex itself, there is one of the 51 Pitastans that are sacred to worshippers of Shakti. The Thakur there is Ma Bimala, and the 51 Pitastans are places where different parts of Ma Shakti's body fell. That's why Kalighat is an important temple, and other places as well. So within the structure of the Jagannath temple, there is one of the Pitastans. And as we know, Shakti worship and Tantra has been important to the Bengali way of doing things for centuries. Finally, in Bengali literature, there are several Mongol kavyas that have been written on Jagannath. And if anybody has an interest in these, the names of them are Jagannath Mongol or Jagannath Bijoy. If anybody's interested to see these texts, I have a digital copy of one of them, and I'd be glad to send it to you afterwards if you have an interest in it. So all of these features make it pretty clear that Jagannath Puri Ratha Yatra have been an important part of Bengali religious life for a long, long time. So I want to conclude today's talk by summarizing a passage from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which talks about Mahaprabhu's experience at Ratha Yatra. Now, if you read the Vaishnava biographies or hagiographies, you can see that the religious life of Jagannath was pretty much an important part of Mahaprabhu's life and what he did. So this comes from chapter 13 of the Modulila of Krishnadas Kaviraj's Chaitanya Charitamrita, and I'll just summarize a few features of it and then conclude this talk. So the day before Thakur was to come out from his temple, the people who took care of Mahaprabhu made sure that he was given twice the amount of food that he would need on a daily basis, mainly because they realized that there'd be a heavy large amount of carbohydrates to be needed the next day. So when the next day dawned, Mahaprabhu and his bhaktas, they went down into the temple to watch Jagannath being brought out. One by one, I'm back. One by one, the Thakuras were brought out from the temple. He saw Jagannath brought out. Jagannath was put down on a massive pillow, and the pillow exploded, throwing cotton all over the place. So all these little details are mentioned there. Jagannath was brought out. He saw the king sweep in front of him. Mahaprabhu organized all of his followers into 7 kirtan parties with kol, kartal, people singing and dancing. And it said that when the drums started beating, all of the Bengali Vaishnavas started behaving like madmen. So Mahaprabhu danced in front of Thakur. He did the Udanda dance, which is what you see where his hands are raised clear up over his head like this. He spun around like a madman. He experienced all sorts of deep bhavas, deep feelings, sang songs in front of Jagannath, rolled on the ground, wept, and was in a state of deep trance. And so, as the Jagannath was brought along and pulled, he kept falling to the ground and overwhelmed with deep emotions. So I think I'm over my time limit. So maybe rather than go over this, I'll just conclude my statements here. There's really a lot more that can be said about Ratha Yatra and Jagannath. It's a very deep topic, and I've not even skimmed the surface of it. So thank you for this opportunity to say a few things. And so I'm going to conclude now. Joy Jagannath.
Hello, sorry for the little technical glitch. I was not being able to make myself visible. Thank you, Bob, for your insightful speech. We are really enlightened by the uh, accounts you shared about your own personal experience with Ratha Yatra, as well as the significance of Ratha Yatra and about Lord Yagannath. Also, Bob has.
Can I say a few more things? Two more
Yeah,
things?
yeah, sure.
So if you're interested to know more about if anybody's interested to know more about the Jagannath worship and whatnot, there's one book that's very good. It's called Communication with God. It goes over very detail about Jagannath's daily rituals and whatnot. If anybody wants to know more about Krishnadas Kaviraj's Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's one very good edition by Shukumar Shen. It's published by Ananda Publishers. You can get a copy of it from their bookstore on Rashbihari Avenue. That's a Bangla edition. And if you want to read an English edition, there's the one that was done by my teacher at the University of Chicago and published by Harvard. It's a very good combination of Western and Bengali scholarship. The only thing is it's a bit costly. But if you can't read Bangla and want to read English, this is the one I'd recommend. So if you have any other questions about anything I talked about or want a copy of the Jagannath Mongol, here's my email address. I'm not in the Bengali mailing list, so that's it. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. So thank you, Bob, for your insightful speech. and you have shared your personal account with Ratha Yatra, as well as you have shared significance of Ratha Yatra and Lord Jagannath. She also has shared as account of a great bhakta or disciple, Salavega, and still till date many songs that has been composed by Salavega has been sung by all the Krishna devotees all over the world. So that's a very nice account to share. Now, what we will do is we will share a short video. Our Pujo team members and Bongo Bhavan members has visited our our very own Bongo Bhavan and pulled the Ratha on the day of the Ratha Yatra. We will quickly share a quick video of that, so that though we couldn't um, pull Rath by ourselves, we can at least see Rath pulling ceremony at Banga Bhavan. Here we go.
Started.
আমাদের প্রত্যেক বছর যেরকম রথ টানা হয়, এবছরও কোভিডের জন্য আর বাদ যাবে কেন, তাই আমরা ঠিক করলাম যে না, আমরা টানবো একটু ঠাকুর সাজিয়ে নিয়ে। তাই ঠাকুরকে নিয়ে বাইরে যাচ্ছি, গিয়ে ঘুরে আসবো। এবার সুপ্রীতি, তুমি নাও, তুমি টানো। এবার তো আর বঙ্গভবনে রথ হলো না, মানে বাচ্চাদেরকে দিয়ে টানালে ভালো হতো, কিন্তু এখন আজকে আমরা জাস্ট নিজেরাই একটু করে নিচ্ছি। বাইরে যাবো, এখানে পড়ে না যায় বাইরে, বাইরে না, আমি জন্মেছিল তো, জন্মাষ্টমী তো ঝড়ে বৃষ্টি হচ্ছে, বৃষ্টি পড়ছে। চলো এবার ঘুরে যাও, এবার ঘুরে যাও। ঠাকুরকে নিন, আমরা ক্লোজ আপ নিয়ে নিই। এবার ঘুরে যাও, এদিকে সবাই এখন আবার ঘুরে বাড়ি ফিরছে। এখন আমরা সবাই আবার বাড়ি ফিরছি জগন্নাথকে নিয়ে।
জগতের নাথ জগন্নাথ বাড়ি ফিরছেন এখন।
জগন্নাথ, সুভদ্রা, জগন্নাথ, জয় জয় জগন্নাথ।
ওটা 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 হাত দিয়ে ধরো তুমি। হ্যাঁ দাদা ধরো, থ্যাংক ইউ সো মাচ।
জগন্নাথ আবার বাড়ি ফিরে এলেন। হ্যাঁ ওই বোর্ডটা
গুড, খুব ভালো হয়েছে, খুব ভালো হয়েছে। আজকে বর্ষা হয়েছে, রথযাত্রার দিনে বর্ষা হয়ে গেল।
বর্ষা হয়ে গেল।
ভেরি গুড, ভেরি নাইস।
হ্যালো, এইটা ছিল আমাদের এবারের রথ টানা। নর্মালি ছোটরা রথযাত্রার সময় রথ টানে। আমরা যখন ছোট ছিলাম তখন বাবার হাত ধরে রথ টানতে যেতাম। আমাদের নেবারহুড কিডসের মধ্যে একটা ছোটোখাটো কম্পিটিশান হতো যে কে কত ভালো রথ সাজাতে পারে। আমরা রঙিন কাগজ কিনে এনে শেকল বানাতাম, আরও অনেক রকমভাবে ফুল দিয়ে মালা দিয়ে জগন্নাথের রথ সাজানোর চেষ্টা করতাম ছোটোবেলায়। তো তার অনেক মধুর স্মৃতি আমি নিশ্চিত প্রায় প্রত্যেকেরই আছে যারা আমাদের সময়ে দেশে বড় হয়ে উঠেছে। কিন্তু এই বছর এই কোভিড-19 সিচুয়েশনে আমাদের যে নেক্সট জেনারেশন তারা হয়তো রথ টানার সুযোগ পেল না, কিন্তু আমাদের বিএজিসি পুজো কমিটি এবং বঙ্গভবন কমিটি রথ টেনে অন্তত আমাদের ট্র্যাডিশন এবং হেরিটেজটা বজায় রাখলো, এটুকু বলা যেতে পারে। এখন আমি আমরা একটা প্রশ্ন সবাই করে, মানে ছোটরা করে থাকে নর্মালি, যে জগন্নাথ ঠাকুর যখন দেখে আমাদের বাড়িতেও, আমার বাড়িতেও আছেন, আমরা পুরী থেকে নিয়ে এসেছি, তো আমার মেয়েও প্রশ্নটি করে যে জগন্নাথ ঠাকুরের হাত নেই কেন। তো সেই ব্যাপারে ভাবছিলাম, যেহেতু মোস্টলি ছোটরা প্রশ্নটি করে এবং এই রথ টানার ব্যাপারটার সঙ্গে আমাদের ছোটবেলার একটা যোগ আছে, আমাদের ছোটদের একটা যোগ আছে, তো ভাবছিলাম যে এই জগন্নাথ ঠাকুরের হাত না থাকার গল্পটা একটু 2-3 মিনিটের জন্য শেয়ার করব পড়ে। তারপরে আমাদের কিছু নাম কীর্তন আছে, নাম গান আছে, দিয়ে তারপরে আমাদের অনুষ্ঠান শেষ হবে। তো এই জায়গাটি একটু পাঠ করছি। এখানে জগন্নাথ ঠাকুরের, যিনি পুরীতে প্রতিষ্ঠিত জগন্নাথ ঠাকুরের যে আইডল বা মূর্তি, তার হাত নেই কেন সে বিষয়ে একটি ছোট অ্যাকাউন্ট। কলিঙ্গের রাজা তখন ইন্দ্রদুম্ন দেব। বিষ্ণুর ভক্ত ইন্দ্রদুম্ন শ্রীক্ষেত্রে একটি মন্দির গড়ে তুললেন। এখন আমরা তাকে চিনি জগন্নাথ ধাম রূপে, কিন্তু সেই মন্দিরে তখন বিগ্রহ নেই। রাজসভায় একদিন কথা প্রসঙ্গে তিনি জানতে পারলেন বিষ্ণুরই এক রূপ নীলমাধবের কথা। অমনি চারদিকে লোক পাঠালেন রাজা। বাকিরা খালি হাতে ফিরে এলেও ফিরলেন না বিদ্যাপতি। তিনি জঙ্গলের মধ্যে পথ হারালে তাকে উদ্ধার করে নিজের বাড়ি নিয়ে এলেন সবর রাজ বিশ্ববসুর কন্যা ললিতা। ললিতার প্রেমে পড়লেন বিদ্যাপতি। বিয়ে হলো দুজনার। বিয়ের পর বিদ্যাপতি দেখলেন রোজ সকালেই সবররাজ কয়েক ঘন্টার জন্য কোথাও যান। রোজ সকালে কোথায় যান বিশ্ববসু? স্ত্রীকে প্রশ্ন করে বিদ্যাপতি জানতে পারলেন যে জঙ্গলের মধ্যে একটি গোপন জায়গায় নীলমাধবের পুজো করতে যান সবররাজ বিশ্ববসু। উৎসাহিত হয়ে উঠলেন বিদ্যাপতি। নীলমাধবের সন্ধান যখন পাওয়া গিয়েছে তখন আর ছাড়া যাবে না। নীলমাধবের দর্শন করার জন্য তিনি বায়না করলেন। বিশ্ববসু প্রথমে রাজি না হলেও অবশেষে মত দিলেন। যথাস্থানে পৌঁছে যখন তিনি দর্শন পেলেন নীলমাধবের, তখন তার প্রাণ আনন্দে ভরে উঠল। বনের মধ্যে পুজোর ফুল কুড়িয়ে এনে বিশ্ববসু যখন পুজোয় বসলেন, অমনি দৈববাণী হলো, এতদিন আমি দিন দুঃখীর পুজো নিয়েছি, এবার আমি মহা উপাচারে রাজা ইন্দ্রদ্যুম্নের পুজো নিতে চাই। তারপরে আমি একটু স্কিপ করছি লেখাটি। তো তারপরে যেটা হয়েছিল সেটা হচ্ছে কি, জগন্নাথ বললেন যে দৈববাণী হলো যে সমুদ্রের জলে ভেসে আসবে কাঠ, বানাতে হবে বিগ্রহ, হাজার হাজার হাতি ঘোড়া সেপাই লোক লস্কর নিয়েও সমুদ্র থেকে তোলা গেল না সেই কাঠ। শেষ পর্যন্ত ব্রাহ্মণপুত্র বিদ্যাপতি আর সবর রাজ দুজনে মিলে সেই কাঠটিকে সমুদ্র গর্ভ থেকে তুললেন। কিন্তু সেই কাঠ এমনই পাথরের মতো শক্ত যে ছেনি হাতুড়ি দিয়েও ভাঙা যায় না। তাহলে উপায় কি? মূর্তি গড়বে কে? মহারাজের আকুলতা দেখে বৃদ্ধের বেশে হাজির হলেন স্বয়ং বিশ্বকর্মা। তিনিই গড়বেন মূর্তি, তবে শর্ত একটাই, 21 দিন আগে তিনি নিজের দরজা না খুললে কেউ যেন তার ঘরে না আসে। শুরু হলো কাজ। ইন্দ্রদ্যুম্নের রানী গুন্ডিচা রোজই রুদ্ধ দুয়ারে কান পেতে শোনেন কাঠ কাটার ঠক ঠক শব্দ। 14 দিন পর হঠাৎ রানী দেখলেন রুদ্ধ দ্বার কক্ষ নিস্তব্ধ। কি হলো? কৌতূহল চেপে রাখতে না পেরে রানী মহারাজকে জানাতেই ইন্দ্রদ্যুম্ন খুলে ফেললেন কক্ষের দরজা। ব্যাস, ভেতরে দেখেন বৃদ্ধ কারিগর উধাও পড়ে আছে 3টি অসমাপ্ত মূর্তি। বৃদ্ধ বলেছিলেন যে মূর্তি গড়া শেষ হওয়া আগে পর্যন্ত দরজা না খুলতে। রাজা ইন্দ্রদ্যুম্ন খুলে দেন। তো তাদের হাত পা কিছুই গড়া হয়নি। গর্হিত অপরাধ করে ফেলেছেন ভেবে দুঃখে ভেঙে পড়লেন রাজা। তখন তাকে স্বপ্ন দিয়ে জগন্নাথ বললেন যে এরকম আগে থেকেই নির্ধারিত ছিল, তিনি এই রূপেই পূজিত হতে চান। তো বেসিক্যালি রাজা ইন্দ্রদ্যুম্ন ওই মন্দিরের দ্বার খুলে দিয়েছেন বলে অসমাপ্ত রেখে বিশ্বকর্মা মূর্তিটিকে অসমাপ্ত রেখে চলে যান, এবং সেই রূপেই তারপর থেকে জগন্নাথ পূজিত হন। জগন্নাথের হাত না থাকার গল্পটি অনেকটা এইরকম। এরপরে আমরা আমাদের অনুষ্ঠানের শেষ অংশে চলে এসেছি। এখানে আমরা যেটা করব সেটা হচ্ছে গিয়ে আমাদের কালীপদদা, আমাদের অনেক কালীপদ পাহান এবং ক্রেশ, ওনার ছেলে ক্রেশ, ওনারা দুজনে মিলে কিছু নাম গান সংকীর্তন করবেন, এবং তারপরে আমরা অনুষ্ঠানের শুভ সমাপ্তি করব। তো কালীপদদা আর ক্রেশ, তোমাদেরকে আমি এবার ডেকে নেব।
We would like to thank the BGC Cultural Committee for giving us this opportunity. We wish you all a very happy Ratha Yatra.
Om Jagannathaya Vidmahe Om Jagannathaya Vidmahe Vishwarupaya Dhimahi Tanno Vishnu Prachodayat. Om Astrahastaya Vidmahe Pitambaraya Dhimahi Tanno Balaram Prachodayat. Om Narayana Vidmahe Bhuvaneshwaraya Dhimahi Tanno Subhadra Devi Prachodayat. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath Swami, Jaya Jagannath. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath Swami, Jaya Jagannath. Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath Swami, Jaya Jagannath. জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ স্বামী জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ স্বামী জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ স্বামী জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ স্বামী জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ স্বামী জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ স্বামী জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় জগন্নাথ জয় বলদেব জয় সুভদ্রা 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 জগন্নাথ স্বামী নয়ন পথগামী নয়ন পথগামী ভবতুলে 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 ঈশ্বর আল্লাহ তেরে নাম সবকো সম্মতি দে ভগবান ঈশ্বর আল্লাহ তেরে নাম সবকো সম্মতি দে ভগবান রঘুপতি রাঘব রাজা রাম পতিত পাবন সীতারাম রঘুপতি রাঘব রাজা রাম পতিত পাবন সীতারাম সীতারাম জয় সীতারাম सब তো সম্মতি দে ভগবান রঘুপতি রাঘব রাজা রাম পতিত পাবন সীতারাম রঘুপতি রাঘব রাজা রাম পতিত পাবন সীতারাম।
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
শ্রীকৃষ্ণ চৈতন্য প্রভু নিত্যানন্দ শ্রী অদ্বৈত গদাধর শ্রীবাসাদি গৌর ভক্তবৃন্দ। হরে কৃষ্ণ 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 হরে হরে, হরে রাম 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 হরে হরে। Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kansachanuramardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kansachanuramardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadguru. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Paramamne odhikaraste ma phale sukadachane ma karmo kono hetu na te sangoku sokarmane. Paramamne odhikaraste ma phale sukadachane ma karmo kono hetu na te sangoku sokarmane. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jaya Narasingha Dev, Jaya Narasingha Dev, Jaya Narasingha Dev, Jaya Narasingha Dev.
Jaya Narsingadev, Jaya Narsingadev, Jaya Narsingadev, Jaya Narsingadev.
Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha.
Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha, Jaya Lakshmi Narasimha.
Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladev, Jaya Subhadra.
Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Jagannath, Jaya Baladev, Jaya Subhadra.
Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai.
Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai, Jaya Gauranitai.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol.
Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Jai Jagannath Balaram Subhadra Maharaniর জয়, জয় জগন্নাথ দেবের রথযাত্রার জয়।
Prathame, I want to thank Chris for being our second generation kid and yet doing Nam Sankirtan in such a marvelous way. I am touched. We are all touched by your devotion and your staying to the roots. So I really would like to give a round of applause for Chris. And then obviously Kalipada Pahanda, we have given you a very short notice. We understand that, not that we don't understand that. In a very short notice, Kalipada and even Bob both as agreed to do perform on our Ratha Yatra event. We are really thankful to all of you. And one thing I would like to say that one of our dear BJC member Purobidi is critically ill and she is hospitalized. We would like to dedicate this Nam Sankirtan to make sure that she gets well very soon. Other than that, I would like to thank our puja committee, Sompita Di, Supriti Di, and Monisha Di to go over Bongo Bhavan on that kind of a rainy day. It was raining very heavily on that day, and because Dhalida, who you have not seen the person who was behind the scene, who was taking the video, was because our Vice President, because Dhali, and our President Jayantoda continuously kept calling me and asked me to that so that we do something for to involve the kids of BAGC on this Ratha Yatra program. He was very interested in this Ratha Yatra program, but unfortunately we couldn't involve many of our kids because of this COVID-19 situation. We just hope that during the Janmashtami program we should be able to maybe involve kids or in some other program. But thank you, Jayantada, for giving us this opportunity because you have gone there to take the video. Mr. Bobby Evans for such an insightful speech, and of course Chris and God Kalibada Bahanda for this wonderful performance. And I just hope our Purobidi gets better. And with this, I would like to conclude this program. Nayano Pathogami Jagannath Samir কাছে আমাদের প্রার্থনা তিনি আমাদের সুস্থ রাখুন, তিনি সকলের মঙ্গল করুন।